they don't look at this as a necessary evil, but as a lesser good. The killing of people in war can be a good. In the same way, and here's the analogy that's used in one of the books. If I have a knife in my hand and I come up to you and this is kind of gross, okay, sorry, but I have a knife in my hand and you're on the street and I come up to you and I rip open your chest, okay, is that a good or is that an evil?
Well, from my perspective, it's an evil.
Right. Well, and from the perspective of society and most people, Christian or not, that's an evil. We punish people for doing things like that. Those people are hopefully in.
Of course, if the recipient of the action is Adolf Hitler, perhaps.
Okay. Well, that's just something else to throw in.
Perception of society may be a good.
Right. But here's another example. If you are on the operating table, God forbid, and a surgeon takes a knife and cuts open your chest very carefully. And operates on you.
Different motive.
Different motive, but the same action. The same action, now done more carefully, done for a different reason, done by a different agent. Okay. But not a necessary evil. I don't think most of us would say open heart surgery is a necessary evil. I think most of us would probably say it's an unfortunate thing, but it's good. We got to get it done because this is what we have to do to save this person's life. So when you bring up the analogy of war as, when you're killing people, you're destroying things, and as always happens in war, innocent people are inevitably hurt, killed, psychologically damaged, loss of property.
Well, can I point something out at this point? We all know that about war, but the way abortion was introduced originally was as the end of a pregnancy.
Right.
It has only gradually morphed into the right to a dead baby, which is the Freedom of Choice Act, and the Infants Born Alive Act. What if we had a Prisoners Captured Alive Act? Should we keep them alive or should we kill them immediately? Do we have a right to dead POWs or should they be alive? We've parsed this issue way back in order to be able to digest it morally as a society.
Right.
Digesting abortion and making it a right, and you are a primitive, you're a Neanderthal if you don't understand that this advances the rights of women.
Right.
But now we're to the point of making a dead baby the law. That's quite different.
Or to go after old people or whatever else.
Anybody,
or the infirm, or
the dead
the
person who is an inconvenience is what you have a right to.
Right.
We've parsed this out step by step in a way we have not done with war.
Right.
We don't have a Prisoners Captured Alive Act that Congress has to pass or not.
Right.
We've done crazy logic things with the abortion issue to be able to swallow it as a society and a culture.
I agree. Right.
The Supreme Court actually said, one of the justices, I can't remember which one, said that the Supreme Court did not legislate from the bench when they upheld Roe v. Wade. But that's wrong. They most certainly did because of the way that it is all-inclusive now, to include the health of the mother, who says that the mother's life is more important. Who's the authority that says the mother's life is more important than the baby's life? I mean, and life.
And what is the definition of health?
Exactly. Well, what they did was they made the definition of health so broad that it could be anything.
Right.
I don't want my hair to get straight with a pregnancy.
Stretch marks.
I don't want stretch marks.
Well, and again, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but getting back to the analogy with the just war, and I think most Orthodox Christians agree that abortion is an evil. I think that a lot of by Orthodox, I don't mean the Eastern Orthodox Church, but Orthodox Westernese, what there may be a disagreement on, obviously, is whether war is an evil or can be a good.
Yeah, and that was the purpose of my raising this issue, not to get into a discussion of abortion, but to test this idea of just war versus justifiable war.
Right.
But it does get into it because it talks of it. It is just or justifiable.
Yeah.
Right. But be aware that we're not talking about what you might call situational ethics.
Yeah. Also, there's another fundamental difference here. We're not talking about the abortionist going around looking for people and deciding it's in their best interest or society's best interest to perform an abortion on that person.
But that has been the case in the past, in the case of Nazi Germany, for example, and even in this country, when folks would say, you're retarded, therefore you shouldn't be
Yeah.
allowed
Yeah,
to
that's
bear a child.
Yeah.
The whole
So-
Margaret Sanger movement
And
moved
that's
towards.
exactly,
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
Planned
Definitely.
Parenthood in spades.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, what the church goes, and now I'm talking the Eastern Orthodox Church, so I'm just using the same terms in different regions. What the Eastern Orthodox Church, many theologians talk about when we're dealing with things like this, whatever the controversial things such as abortion or war. And by controversial, I mean in society, it shouldn't be in the church. War is what they call the Pauline principle. Has anybody heard of the Pauline principle? I have not.
No.
Okay, and it could be that there are different Pauline principles, but what the church has talked about in the East is, what shall we do then? Shall we continue to do evil that good may increase?
Oh,
God
yeah.
forbid. You know, if you remember that verse in Romans, I don't think I wrote down the exact verse, but if you remember Romans, a lot of times what Paul would do is he'll bring up arguments that he anticipates, a lot like Aquinas, except Aquinas actually addresses arguments, but brings up arguments that he anticipates and then answers them, usually with God forbid, certainly not, depending on the translation. No! You know? And one of the things that he says is, shall we do good? Shall we do evil that good may increase? No. And a lot of what we've talked about with just war thinkers as we've marched through about 2,500 years of history, going back to Cicero, is that many of them, and this includes in the Western Church, have said war is an evil. Now, it's a necessary evil, but it's an evil, particularly when you get more towards modern era thinkers. It's an evil because man is sinful, and we have to do what we have to do to survive. Now, what the Eastern Church says to that is, if war is an evil, necessary or not, we cannot bless it, we cannot sanction it, because the church cannot sanction evil. Okay. Therefore, it has to be either is a good or it is prohibited in any and all circumstances. Now, does that? You may need to think about that for a little while, but if you think about it, it actually makes a lot of theological sense. At least
Can you say that again?
Okay. War it must be, for the church, if it's not a good, a lesser good or otherwise, and when you talk about war, by the way, we're talking about the lesser good of justice versus the greater good of love. If you're familiar with the cardinal versus the theological virtues in the church. Temperance, justice, fortitude.
Prudence.
Oh, somebody.
Prudence.
Prudence, thank you. Temperance, justice, fortitude, prudence are the cardinal virtues. And by cardinal, and don't let me not answer your question because now I'm on a tangent. Cardinal virtues are the virtues that we all have by virtue of being humans. You don't have to have special revelation from God to be able to practice temperance, justice, prudence, and fortitude.
Natural law applied to man.
Natural law, the civilizing ethic. These talk about things that we ought to do. We ought to practice these values. And you don't have to be born again. You don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to be in the church to be able to practice these. And we know that because there are plenty of societies that have flourished with leaders and citizens who are not professing Christians, but who recognize these virtues. However, Rome, pre-Constantinian Rome, although of course there were pockets of serious persecution of Christians.
Non-psychotic Rome.
Right, non-psychotic Rome, particularly prior to the time of Christ, when you're dealing with, again, I always go back to the Cicero.
Yes.
Right, the Republic. Yes, thank you. So when we talk about war being a lesser good, we talk about it being a lesser good because war is the practice of justice. It is the virtue of justice in action. Now that's different than Augustine, remember, who said that war is the practice of love. I kill my enemy because I love him. Now we're not going to get back into that because we talked about it and that would be another 30 minutes. But this is different than Augustine. It is not I kill my enemy because I love him. It's I kill my enemy because I am practicing justice and I'm going to save my homeland. I'm going to save my fatherland, my motherland, or my church, or whatever I'm protecting, the people around me, because it is actually the greater action for me to take is to practice the Beatitudes by protecting those around me.
Sure.
Okay. However, the greater good, which sometimes can't be practiced because of the realities of life. And again, you may think, well, that sounds like Christian realism, but it's not. Because again, we're talking goods, not good versus evil. The greater good is practicing charity. Remember the theological virtues, faith, hope, and love. Faith, hope, and charity. So the greater virtue is to practice charity.